My name is Timothy Anderson. I've been in credit union world for financial services since 1979. I went to school in D.C., went to the University of Maryland, graduated there with a bachelor's in business management, and I also have my MBA in finance. So pretty much Washingtonian. Grew up in Washington, went to school here, loved the area, and went to college at the University of Maryland.
And so, what was the first sort of encounter you had with credit unions? How did you learn about the model?
Credit unions. Again, I worked at banks for well over 20-some years. I've been in financial services since 1979. I actually came into the credit union world in 2000. I worked at the United States Senate Federal Credit Union. I was a manager there of the Hart branch. We had about 19 employees at the time there under my purview. And I was there for a little over a year. Then I also worked for the Treasury Department Federal Credit Union. I was the COO there. Mark Phillips was the CEO, fine gentleman. Learned a lot from him about credit unions. So then, after leaving the United States Senate Federal Credit Union, I was asked to run for the board. Once you leave, if you're gone for at least a year, you could be a volunteer on the board. So I ran for the board. I won my first time around, and I've been on that board since 2003.
So how many credit unions are you currently a member of?
How many credit unions? Well, not only, and let me just back up, because I'm also on the board at the Transportation Federal Credit Union. That particular credit union, I've been there since 2003 as well. My wife works for the FAA, and so we became members of Transportation Federal Credit Union back in 1979. And so I ran for that board in 2003. I won that seat, so I'm currently on that board as well. Credit unions have had a great impact on me, but what I found out is by being a volunteer, it really helped me in my professional life as a credit union CEO.
And so all of these credit unions you're involved with have a common bond that is that's employment in a particular federal agency?
Yes. The United States Senate Federal Credit Union, by and large, is for the United States Senate community. And they have opportunity to have their services or offer their services to others as well. But mainly, it's the United States Senate and that community. The same thing with the Treasury Department Federal Credit Union. They have what they call some SEGs, and you can have other members, but by and large, it's the Treasury Department Federal Credit Union, and it's the government there, the Treasury Department. And the same thing here at the Government Printing Office Federal Credit Union.
And can you speak a little bit, since this is all all kind of attached to the federal government, can you speak a little bit to the sort of history of African Americans in kind of federal employment, and maybe the Government Printing Office in particular?
Yeah, and Matt, that's the and that's been intriguing to me. I can recall when I first came here at the Government Printing Office Federal Credit Union. I came here in January 2011 as the CEO, and it was kind of interesting to me. The story of the government being blue collar was just kind of interesting, because I was asked by the personnel chair, I remember at the time, during the interview, he said, well, I see that you have just tremendous experience as white-collar credit unions, white-collar banks. How do you think you would be at a blue-collar credit union? And it never dawned on me that GPO would be considered a blue-collar credit union. But actually, it's pretty much a big plant with 3 shifts, and there's a huge contingent of African Americans in the workforce as a part of our credit union. Throughout the building, African Americans are just tenured workers, been here for a long time, and really been a huge part of the growth at the Government Printing Office. And
so when you talk about the blue collar and white collar credit unions, having been in both, what have you seen as kind of the differences and the similarities?
Well, it's interesting because at every credit union is different. There are differences, and clearly that there's similarity as well. I'll speak to GPO at the Government Printing Office Federal Credit Union. Here, we also have what we call an underserved designation, meaning that we can serve all of Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. at the time was an underserved area. I think that's changing. That's changing tremendously. But I think the impact that we've had is really on a lot of African Americans. We're considered a low-income designated credit union. In comparison, where I worked at the United States Senate Federal Credit Union, Senate would be considered more of a white-collar credit union. So clearly, you can draw some distinctions there, and there are some differences.
And so do you see those differences playing out kind of in the way the members relate to the credit union, or the sort of types of loans that are required, or what do you see as the character of that?
I would say here, again, speaking at the Government Printing Office Federal Credit Union, we have what we call risk-based lending, and by and large, we kind of reach everyone, and I think that that having programs that kind of reach everyone, clearly is a difference. And not saying that the white-collar credit unions don't have that, but I've worked at some that they don't actually specialize in going after those that perhaps don't have A1 credit. We kind of cast a large umbrella because we understand that the opportunity isn't just with those with 700 and 800 credit scores, but we've got opportunity also with those that don't have it. Again, that whole idea of credit unions being there as financial institutions for the underserved.
And can you speak a little bit to the history of the GPO credit union, kind of, in terms of when it was founded and its development, kind of what you know of that?
Yeah, GPO FCU, the credit union, was founded in 1935. As a matter of fact, we're going to have our 80th year next year. So we're excited about that. The credit union has been around for a long time. When I started with the credit union, and I remember over the years when I was at other credit unions, GPO, somewhere teetered around assets in the 20 million in assets. When I got here, the credit union was at about 32.4 million in assets. Right now, we're approaching 38 million. Soon we'll be at 40 million in assets. So we're growing by leaps and bounds, and we're controlling that growth, obviously. In this environment, you have to do that. I just think that we've done a lot of things to position ourselves. Right now, we're going to open up another branch downstairs. That's been a goal of the credit unions for years, and we just achieved that. Just got the space a couple weeks ago. We're excited about that. We're branching out, we're growing, and we're just trying to take our services to as many as we can. And
so in one of the trends with federal employment and the GPO that we were talking about before we started the interview is that as automation has happened, the number of employees of the government printing office has declined. So how has that impacted the credit union, and what are the kind of strategies around that?
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, because one of the things that we have to always be concerned with is to make sure that we continue to grow with our members. Without our members, we can't make loans. Without loans, we don't have loan income. So we want to take as many of our products and services to as many people as possible. Clearly, being really GPO based, and the agency has downsized. During good times, the agency had thousands of employees. Right now, that's somewhere around 2,000, or perhaps even a little under 2,000. So with the digital age, GPO has become more efficient. The agency, therefore, the credit union members have left. At least left the premises. We do all we can to keep them as members, but sometimes when they go elsewhere, it's kind of hard to do that. So our goal is to continue to build on the underserved, because anyone that goes to school, lives, worship, or pretty much almost walk through DC can be a member. And we have that designation, so there's opportunity to reach more.
And so are you guys thinking of putting further branches out in other parts of the city, or what is that kind of that growth plan look like?
Yeah, and that's a good question, and we are. I just had a meeting this morning with my senior staff, and there's opportunity for not only additional organic growth, where we can just grow from our base, but we're looking at mergers and opportunities there. If there's an opportunity, and we've had some talks with some local credit unions, if there's an opportunity where we can take on a merger, and we've only said that we want to be the surviving institution. So if we can be the surviving institution and take on a merger, then instantly we're going to have other locations, and that growth there would augment what we're trying to do.
And so in terms of the kind of the larger world of federal agency credit unions, which your organization is one, and you're on the board of several others, it seems like that you have these pretty intense connections, since you have that sort of shared leadership between them. Can you speak maybe a little bit to more broadly what that community of credit unions looks like?
Yeah, and certainly, and I'll back up a little and talk a little bit about that, because I think that's critical. I think that having the opportunity, if you will, to be a part of the credit union world with different institutions it's really helped me be a better CEO. When I became a member, when I got on the board at the United States Senate Federal Credit Union, it was a learning ground, but it gave me the opportunity to understand credit unions from a volunteer's perspective. I also served as the chairman of the board of that credit union. The same thing with Transportation Federal Credit Union. And only in credit union world can you do that, where you can be a CEO of one credit union, yet be on the board of others. In the banking world, you're not allowed to do that. There are management interlock rules that would prevent that. In credit union world, you're exempt from that, the management interlock rules. So it gives me an opportunity, I believe, because I have such a passion for credit unions, to get as much as I can. And the United States Senate Federal Credit Union has been great with that experience. Same thing with transportation. And when I got the job here as the CEO, it was one of the selling points. As a matter of fact, the board mentioned that that was good experience, and they were kind of looking for that. So I think it was one of the selling points in helping me become a CEO here.
And so so how many of those sorts of credit unions, the kind of government agency credit unions, are in DC?
Oh, wow, quite a few. And just to name a few, I mean, United States Senate Federal Credit Union, Transportation, Treasury Department Federal Credit Union. There is Justice Federal Credit Union. So there are quite a few government agencies. And here's the challenge: being housed in a government building sometimes can kind of stunt your growth. And that's one of the reasons why it's great that we're getting a presence downstairs, getting a branch downstairs, because it puts us at a competitive disadvantage when you have members having to come through security. The government buildings are highly secure now, so you have to come through security. I'm sure you had to do the same thing yourself coming in, and that's cumbersome for our members. And again, I believe it puts us at a competitive disadvantage.
And being in a government building, as you just mentioned, can you speak a little bit to the relationship between the credit union and the federal government? How does that work?
Yeah, and that's a very good question, and I'm just really pleased to be able to address that, because it's one of the reasons why I think the credit union has an opportunity, a tremendous opportunity to grow. We have an extraordinary leader here. Her name is Davita Vance Cooks. She is the first African American public printer of the agency. That's the head of the agency, appointed by the president. Appointed by President Obama, confirmed by the Senate. The agency had never had African American and never had a female. So yet she's breaking barriers at both levels. She's the first female and African American public printer. We have established a great relationship. She was at our annual meeting last week. She is a huge reason why we're able now to get that space downstairs. When I first got here in 2011, I met with the public printer at the time just to establish a relationship, to let them know that we're a partner. The credit union is a partner, and that we're here for the government printing office members. So that relationship has just been tremendous. And again, without Davita Vance Cooks and her team, it would be very difficult for us to do what we do.
And so the way in which the credit union was originally, or before your common bond expanded, was originally the employees of the GPO. Was that something where was it originally the common bond was just employment in the GPO, or was common bond sort of union membership? Because a lot of credit unions that were employment based were kind of one or the other. Do you know the origins of that?
Yeah, with GPO, if you work for the agency,
okay.
If you work for the agency, you certainly could be a member at the credit union. And then we also have what we call SEGs. That's Select Employer Groups. And SEGs would be an organization where we would go out in the community and we would convince them that we're their best banking opportunity, and they would partner up with us, and they would join the organization. We'd vote. We'd take it to the board. The board would vote on them to become a member of that organization. Then once they are a SEG, then all of their members can be members as well. All the employees, can be members.
And so, you're talking about the annual meeting that you guys just had. Can you speak a little bit to the credit union's governance and kind of the what participation looks like, kind of if they're the role kind of African Americans have traditionally played in the governance, that sort of thing?
Yes, we and again we had a very successful annual meeting, and it was jam packed, and we had members look forward to it. I've been at some credit unions where if you get a quorum, it's because of staff. But here, members participate. That's what we want. That's what we like. And in terms of the governance, our board consists of former GPO employees, for the most part. The chairman of the board actually was a former general counsel here at the credit union. He is he's a white gentleman, but then our secretary is, but then the other 5 board members are African Americans. They grew up here. 3 of them, I believe it's 3 of them still work in the agency, and there's one that's retired. But these individuals are just incredible volunteers because they grew up in the agency, working in the different departments here at GPO. They bring a very strong background, obviously with the government printing office, and the credit unions has benefited tremendously from that.
And to what do you, having experienced both sides, like the credit unions where the annual meeting is kind of more of a formality, and something where you had a really good turnout at yours, what do you ascribe the sort of strong turnout and strong participation from your members to? Are there any particular factors you think are sort of drive that?
I think that we actually encourage it. And again, I'm not saying that the other credit unions that I've worked at that they don't, but we actively encourage it. I think that's a huge difference. We actually put it in our newsletter. We promote it. We ask them to RSVP. We tell them that it's a huge celebration. We want them there. We walk the halls. We encourage them to come. And I think that's the biggest difference. We want that participation. We solicit that participation. And we make them, or we let them know that without their input, the credit union really isn't able to do what we want to do. We want their input, because if I'm doing things that's not benefiting my members, then what's the use? I want to hear from them. And one of the key factors is that I think sometimes we can get so latent, if you will, in our processes. And at the annual meeting, I addressed the members, and I pointed to a very popular commercial by TD Bank on television. It's Bank Human. And you may have seen some of those commercials where, they're just asking, or they're advertising that all these processes don't have to hold things up. Let's bank human. And that's kind of been our philosophy here at GPO. We have to bank human. We have to understand that members have other opportunities. There are banks and credit unions on every corner, and we've got to make their experience a good one.
And so, what a lot of smaller credit unions and credit unions that have a pretty specific common bond. So, like for instance, working at the GPO or being members of a specific church parish. Oftentimes, kind of in terms of making loan decisions, the kind of social knowledge, the reputation of people in the community is often a factor in that process. Is that something that you see here, or do you guys more rely on objective measures? How does that work?
Yeah, and that's a great question too. I find it to be a little bit of both. I believe that having members that are the volunteers that people know on those critical committees that they can talk to in the hallway. I mean, I think that's a huge part of what we do as credit unions. It's different than banks, and I think that part does allow for a member to be able to just pick up the phone or walking in the hallway and run into one of the members of the credit committee and just strike up a conversation. I'm okay with that. As a matter of fact, I encourage that. Because let's say if a loan was to go before the credit committee, I mean, they're sitting among their peers or before their peers, and I think that's a huge part of what we do as credit unions. Their peers are looking at them and able to render a decision. Certainly, on the lending side, the objective part has to be critical because that's where the professionals we understand how to underwrite. But I think that if there's something that we may miss, or if a member thinks that we didn't see it right, they have an opportunity to go before their peers.
So your mention of the credit committee. A lot of credit unions have moved to more using loan officers. Can you talk a little bit about sort of having been in the banking sector and in different credit unions, your sense of sort of the differences between using credit committee, using loan officers, or some hybrid of the two?
Yeah. That's an interesting area because certainly being at the bank, clearly underwriting was left with the professionals, and probably as it should be. I get that. However, in credit union world, I think there's value added when someone on a credit committee can look at it from a different angle and say, hey, by the way, let's look at this again. When I was at another credit union, I was totally. We understood that the credit committee kind of had run its course, and at that point we made a decision, or a decision was made that committee had kind of run its course. Still, you had the appeal process, but in that instance, it would go directly to the board. Here at GPO, FCU, it works just the other way. We still have a credit committee. I know there are credit unions that have gone away from it, and I believe that they're for good reasons. I understand that. It still works for us here. The credit committee is very, very active. We are certainly we work in partnership with them. Clearly, once a loan decision is made, you're not going to have everyone displeased with that. We look at every opportunity to make a loan, and we think that by and large, the majority of the loans are made or denied here, and sometimes they never reach the credit committee. But if a member feels that they'd like to have an appeal, then that process is there for them.
And can you speak a little bit to the folks who kind of choose to serve in the role of a credit committee member? Like, who are the people who've kind of stepped up into that role, and what are your sense of like their motivations and things like that? Yeah,
for the most part, in credit unions that I've been a part of, normally you'll have board representation on that credit committee, but it's open to volunteers. Again, I can sit before my peer. Someone that's not looking just at well, they're looking at the underwriting guidelines, but they also hear my story, and I think that's critical. I can remember, Matt, if I may digress a little, I remember being at the bank, and there was an individual, and there were times that everything was just judged by credit scores. And you wanted to take as much subjectivity out of the loan process as possible. Sometimes I don't think you can take all of it out, but as much as possible. But when I got over to credit union world, and I remember as a loan officer, a member came in my office, and this particular member had been turned down. We had turned this member down. And the member sat there, and I just said, I want to hear your story. And when I heard the member's story, I got the opinion then that that member would pay that loan back before they eat. And I made the loan. So again, you want to have, you've got your objective criteria there. But whenever I'm approaching a lending decision, I want to hear the person's story.
And again, sort of thinking about the governance, does this credit union tend to have a pretty sort of stable board in terms of its competition? Do you tend to have competitive elections? Like, what does that piece look like?
Very stable board. Most of our board members have been there for a while. The chairman is the former counsel, as I mentioned, the general counsel here at GPO. But that particular individual also serves on the board at the United States Senate Federal Credit Union. He's been in credit union world forever. He actually, I believe he did some work on the League Association with the Credit Union League, so he knows credit unions. Our vice chair, again, very tenured board member, works at the agency. All of our board members bring, I believe, a wealth of knowledge. They know GPO. And I think that's our biggest seg, if you will, our biggest sponsor. Our sponsor, GPO, is critical to us. So we have various knowledge-based individuals that bring different things, and I believe that we can compete. I believe our board has the knowledge, skills, and abilities to compete with other credit unions.
And sort of thinking again back on the GPO's FCU's history, most of these credit unions started off with either many started off being either totally volunteer run or with various or part-time staff initially, and then over time the trend has been towards more professionalization. Right. What's your sense of how that's played out at GPO, and kind of what maybe your thoughts on that trend in terms of the movement as a whole?
Certainly, I think volunteers are huge in the movement as a whole. I know that there's some credit unions where volunteers are actually running the credit union. I believe volunteers bring a wealth of knowledge, but I think if you have an opportunity to have the professionals run the credit union, I think you're better served. I think the board's role is an oversight role. It's very critical. And they bring a lot to the table. But if you have an opportunity to have the professionals in those areas running the credit union, and certainly in partnership with the board, I think you have a better credit union.
And so, in terms of GPO Federal Credit Union, do you have a sense of kind of when that transition sort of happened, or if it was kind of from the beginning it was fairly professionalized? Do you have any sense of that history?
From my understanding, and as much as I know about GPO, and there were, a few CEOs obviously before me. It's been a role where the board has had professionals in the positions. That's been the history as I know it.
And then, so one other thing I'm kind of curious about is you're personally involved in the African American Credit Union Coalition.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit to that involvement and sort of what you see as the kind of meaning and purpose of that organization?
Yeah, and I get excited when I talk about the African American Credit Union Coalition. AACUC has just been, it's been tremendous for my career. Right now, I serve on the board. I've been on the board, I guess, 2 years now. I'm the treasurer of the board. I'm also the social media committee chair. This year I chair the nominating committee. So I'm very active with the African American Credit Union Coalition. That organization has just been tremendous. And when I look back at some of the founding members, if you will, Helen Godfrey Smith and Sheila Montgomery, Michael Hale was on the board back then, and then Hubert Huseman, and then Bert Hash later on. Lynette Smith right now is our chair. It's just been just a tremendous partnership, and I can say that I can directly attribute my being a CEO with my involvement with the African American Credit Union Coalition. Michael Hale, the gentleman that I mentioned, at the time he was running Andrews Federal Credit Union. Andrews, right now I think they're approaching about $1 billion in assets, close to it, and back in 2004 was my first experience with the African American Credit Union Coalition. I went to a conference in Atlanta, and I had met Michael Hale when Michael was looking for a COO. He interviewed me. I was at the Treasury Department Federal Credit Union at the time, and it was just a great partnership, and he mentored me. As a matter of fact, at the Government Affairs Conference a couple weeks ago here in D.C., I had an opportunity to see him, and I said to him, thank you. He told me at the time, Tim, I knew back then you'd be a CEO, but it's been that mentorship. A gentleman by the name of Herbert Huseman, just a tremendous mentor. Bert Hash. Those individuals in the African American Credit Union Coalition, they've just been tremendous. Helen Godfrey Smith, just so well known in credit union world. Sheila Montgomery, and they're making huge impacts at their credit unions. Lynette Smith, she's doing a wonderful job as chair.
And so through your involvement in that and the conversations you've had, the relationships you've built, are there any things kind of common threads that you found about kind of the experience of African Americans in the credit union movement, like certain shared experiences that or things that have happened, you kind of recognize that brings you all kind of together in that?
And I didn't mention Barbara Stevens. I think Barbara was a founding member as well, and Barbara jumps out because Barbara's credit union and my credit union were about the same size, and just having an opportunity to talk to Barbara about a similitude, things that are pretty similar, has been just tremendous for me. I think when you look at common bonds, I think you have African American leaders all across the country. And I think we share some of the same struggles. I think I know as a low-income designated credit union, I've got a lot of African Americans here in my credit union, and so I think that just being able to talk to others in the same common bond just helps. It gives me perhaps an insight that I wouldn't have.
And another thing I'm kind of wondering about is the way in which the relationships that have been kind of built through that. Do you see as something that is primarily a way of kind of sharing sort of best practices and kind of understandings about those common things, or do you see any other roles for that organization?
And I do. We're very big in mentoring. We mentor. We have scholarships for students. We have programs where we actually go out to credit unions and assist them. And I think that that's critical because in this credit union environment, it's very, very hard to compete. I think the complexity is just overbearing at times. I think that regulation, the subsequent cost with that is just tremendous. And I think it's tough for credit unions, African American credit unions, low-income designated credit unions to survive. So when you have an organization like the African American Credit Union Coalition with tremendous resources, and I'm mainly talking about human capital. When you look at CEOs with a wealth of knowledge like Helen and Bird and Lynette, I mean, just to be able to go, and Barbara and Sheila and Mark Brantley and Tanita Webb, just to be able to go and assist struggling credit unions. I mean, I just think that I just don't know that I don't know where else you would get that.
And so, talking about some of those challenges that you guys have been coming together to work on, like what for you, when kind of looking at the credit union movement more generally, like what do you see as the sort of challenges in the near future that credit unions are going to have to deal with and wrestle with?
A lot of regulation, a lot of costs associated with regulations, and I understand the regulations. I think they're excessive. Clearly as a CEO, that's probably going to be my view, because we're all put in the same boat. What happened with the downturn of the economy and the big banks and the corporate credit unions, well, we didn't have anything to do with that. But when the laws are written and the regulations are put in place, well, they apply to everyone, by and large. So we're put in the same boat with everyone else when we didn't even cause the mess. So I think that that's burdensome. I think the regulations can, and the costs associated with the regulations and the competition, the expenses, will push some credit unions out. And that's unfortunate. I don't know the answer to that, other than the collaborative efforts that we, again, and that's really huge with the African American Credit Union Coalition, just collaboration, the collaborative effort that, that we embark upon with our credit union members, with members of the African American Credit Union Coalition. I think that's what's going to help us. But in terms of what some of the biggest challenges are, I think just regulation. I think the cost of running the credit union, the complexity. Things aren't getting easier, they're getting more difficult.
And, so having been in the credit union world, in the banking world, and having seen multiple credit unions, what do you feel is kind of at the core of the kind of credit union identity? What is it? What is that essence of credit unionism, or to you?
Clearly, the motto: people helping people. I think this. I think if we don't continue to understand that motto is more than just a great theme or sounds good, we've got to practice that. People helping people. I think we need more of that. I think that sometimes, as we kind of lose our way, and we can never lose our way. And the reason why we can or should never lose our way is because then we become like any other financial institution. Being on the banking side, I've seen it there for 20-some years. And we lend to people that banks won't lend to. We give mortgages to people. We give them their first cars. We give them credit cards that banks won't lend to. And I think as a credit union industry, we can't lose our way. We just can't lose our way, and I think we have to always remember that. I think with the burdensome regulations and the things that are coming down the pike, it's kind of easy to do that, because if we are very healthy and our bottom line is great, it's easy for us to say, well, I just got to worry about my credit union. But I think that whole people helping people, we can never forget that whenever one credit union ceases to exist, it affects all of us.
And what do you think are, pulling that to a little more concrete place, like what do you think are ways in which the movement can really sort of maintain and hold on to those values?
Certainly, I think that we have to continue to preach it, if you will. We have to continue to educate our younger generation. Because here at my credit union, we're huge on the various generations, Generation Y, Generation Z, and we want to go after those. They're going to be the future borrowers. So I think we've got to continue to preach it. I think at the African American Credit Union Coalition, I think we do a wonderful job with scholarships and mentoring, bringing the young professionals in, bringing the interns in, and just training them on the credit union model. I think that's one way where we can't lose our way. If we continue to just focus on that, continue to get that message across, because I think that if we don't, credit unions have been going by the wayside, and that's unfortunate. When, as I mentioned, if one credit union ceases to exist, I think it affects all of us.
And any other kind of thoughts or stories or things that we haven't covered that about GPO or about the larger kind of credit union world that you'd like to share?
Well, I would like to see credit unions just kind of cast a broader net. We have credit unions that are struggling, and I think that there are tremendous opportunities out there. I think we've got to not always do things the same way. One of the things that I've been tremendously interested in is business participation loans, and credit unions that are very active in business loans, commercial loans, and just getting into areas that haven't been traditionally credit unions. I think we always have to keep on that innovative hat. I think there are areas that we can make a splash, if you will, but we've got to continue to be innovative. I'm also a part of a business participation QSO. The United States Senate actually owns a QSO that make business participation loans. I chair that board. And so I just see tremendous opportunities for credit unions that if they have mentorship and they have those that are willing to help them out, there are areas to make money, and we just have to go after it.